Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Dr. Dennis Carroll, yes, once again you have decided to make your way into the darkness of the fox den and awaken me from my slumber. I have been sleeping for so long. I really do hope you have brought me some nutritional value. Well, I do appreciate that. It was truly delicious. And now that I am fully revamped and the shackles have been released, it is once again time for Dr. Carroll and, of course, Midnight Lycanthropy to take a walk into the madness.
Stood up. I said, oh my god, it's a werewolf. And everybody in the car freaked out.
My creatures of the night, yes, welcome back to another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on LordeStarfox Radio. We, of course, have Dr. Dennis Carroll already sitting around the late night fire and waiting for us to join him as he again dives into some very interesting and mysterious encounters. Dr. Carroll, how you doing tonight, man?
Doing good here. Good to be back with you here. Very close to the witching hour tonight.
Yes, this is definitely always good to sit down and link up for sure, man. Love it. Great stuff right there. I am going to toss you the good old mic, let you take center stage here.
It's one thing I always like to do. Absolutely. I like to share the knowledge of things we find. And as an investigative researcher, I love to dive deep into these things. And, we call them rabbit holes. I think they're even deeper than rabbit holes. I've come upon some of the physical rabbit holes in my time, and they're not as deep as some people think, but some of these are definitely spiritual rabbit holes. Definitely, they go very, very deep, deeper than some of them may not even have a bottom to them. Definitely, but my research has led me lately to some interesting correlations between three entities that we've talked about a lot in the past, and that's werewolves, dogmen, and skinwalkers. They do have a lot of similarities, these three things, but they also have some very distinct differences. And that is what definitely gives the subject a whole lot more interesting slant to it. Skinwalkers are a fascinating thing. Just recently I was asked to do a forward on a book about skinwalkers, and I'm going to get deep into that, definitely. But they are fascinating. And the interesting thing about the skinwalker is that it is based in very dark, evil magic, sorcery, witchcraft, whatever name you want to put on it. It does have a sort of demonic power to it, very much like the werewolf. That may leave the Dogman out, but we're going to talk about that too in a little while here. Definitely, there is a connection with it too. But the interesting thing about the skinwalker is that it's supposed to be able to assume almost any form that it can. What it does is it bends and twists reality to the way it wants it to go. That's what all black magic is good at doing. And The interesting thing, though, about the Skinwalker is that when you have that Skinwalker card you got to play on the table, you got to realize that, well, this thing, this entity is so far out, so wild, so unpredictable that you don't know really what side to approach it from. But the interesting thing about the Skinwalker, if it can assume the forms of things that it wants to, it can look like a raven, supposedly it can look like a coyote or a wolf, a dog, even has been known to supposedly appear as a bat, very much like the vampire supposedly does. It is a premier shapeshifter. It is a witch, definitely. And the witch can do these things. But here's the interesting thing that kind of sets it apart from the werewolf is that the skinwalker supposedly can possess things. In other words, it can put its spirit inside of animals. And I find that very fascinating thing because it's very close to what we would call demonic possession in some ways. You're also astral projecting your psychic, not just ability, but your psychic consciousness when you do that, when you put it into the body of another animal or person, as the case may be. And here's the interesting thing about this: if it can do that with an animal, it definitely could do that with a person. And now you're kind of getting into Wendigo territory here. That's another strange thing about it. Although the Wendigo is not recognized as a witch, it has the same basic kind of supernatural powers attached to it in some ways. Not every way, but in some ways. With the Skinwalker. The Skinwalker, to me, what makes it more fascinating. If it can definitely possess things, then it could assume any form it wants to. That includes looking like people that it wants to. It could also assume the form of a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch, even Dogman if it wanted to, because that is the form that it is familiar definitely with. So if it can do ravens and crows and wolves, it could certainly do Dogman. It could certainly do Sasquatch. It could certainly get inside of you if it wanted to. And it is astral projecting. It is projecting spiritually itself into these things. It will true possession allows you complete control. And that if it can do that, and that's what supposedly the skinwalker can do. If it can do that, then you're dealing with a very weaponized entity here. It could do anything. It could appear as a small child. It could appear as a cow out in the field. It could be a bear. It could be anything it wants to look like. That to me makes the Skinwalker really one of the most dangerous of all supernatural entities. Now, you've heard me talk many times about the werewolf, and by the way, the werewolf is really sort of my favorite cryptid. He is always bigger than life, definitely, and he has that. He is fueled by that dark magic, this dark demonic power. He's a very powerful animal, but he is kind of limited. Unlike the Skinwalker definitely has unlimited power in many different ways because it is using magic. Although the werewolf is magic and using a demonic power, it sort of is limited to that one form of a werewolf. Skinwalker, though, goes across the board. It can appear as whatever it may want to look like. To me, that makes it doubly dangerous because you could be talking to your best friend and not know it, but it could be the skinwalker. And here's another attribute of the skinwalker: the fact that the skinwalker can affect your mind. It can mess around with your perception of reality. It can get you to see things that it wants you to see or believe things that it wants you to believe. It can also throw off your whole grasp of time and space itself. That's scary when you think about it. Now, if you were to confront a skinwalker, and I saw a scene very similar to this in the television show Dark Winds. I don't know if you're familiar with that. I'm a big fan of that show. The uh, uh, the female deputy actually encounters a skinwalker, and the skinwalker comes to the door and he looks at her and just kind of does sort of like a Jedi mind trick on her here. Okay, and he says, "I'm not here. You haven't seen me. You need to go home." And the deputy is under the spell of the skinwalker. I mean, he can't, and she just turns around and says, "Okay, I'll come back when she's home," and walks off. And she gets a little ways down in the yard and she sits down and she like comes back to herself and she says, "What happened here? What am I doing?" And this is the power of the Skinwalker because it has extreme dark witchcraft power to back it up. It can do these things to your mind and shape, bend, and twist your reality too. And that is another thing to me. If you could do that to someone or something, that is not good to that subject. I mean, that is a when you look at it, that's a very dark and evil thing to do to people or to do to someone and or something for that matter to do to an animal like that because their perception of reality is controlled by you, the bruja that's doing all this, or the brujo that's doing it, whatever the situation. You're completely under their power. Even they are messing around with your ability and your place in space and time. That is freaky when you think about it. And let's turn back for a moment and think about if they can assume the form of a Sasquatch or a Dogman or even a werewolf for that matter. They could do that as well because what's a werewolf? A werewolf is nothing but a witch, a dark sorcerer who has taken upon them that shape, that image of the werewolf. And even certain covens at sometimes, like vampire covens, satanic covens, witch covens, whatever, have actually used werewolves as assassins to take out their enemies and stuff. And so these things can definitely be conjured forth from the darkness. And if they can do that with a werewolf, they certainly could look like a vampire. They could look like anything they want to. They could look like a Sasquatch. They could look like Dogman if that was what suited their taste on that. And here's another interesting thing: if they're going to do that to fool people or to do whatever evil deeds they're out to be doing, they can get you to believe that you're seeing a Dogman or get you to believe you're seeing Sasquatch when that's not the real thing. But yet they can look like that to you and get you to believe you saw something else other than that. This is a perfect way to cover up your crimes in some ways. Um, let's just say you have an encounter with a skinwalker that looks like Sasquatch, and they do something to you, like they hurt someone or they attack someone or something. Can you imagine the conversation you would have with the local police if you reported that? And the police says, "Okay, what happened, bud?" You say, "Sasquatch, broke into your car or something, or did something." They're not going to believe you because basically you're talking about Sasquatch here. But what you really have been the victim of is a dark witch, a skinwalker. It wanted you to think you were dealing with Sasquatch or Dogman or whatever kind of cryptid it can appear to be. It can do a lot of different things. And here's the interesting thing: when you look down through the cultural parts of the whole world, I'm talking about from South America to Africa to Norway to Alaska, you have these shapeshifters who are basically really skinwalkers. That's what they are, although they're known as skinwalkers only in the southwestern part of our country with the Hopi Indians and all that. Although they're known for that, skinwalkers, the expression skinwalker is now being applied everywhere to the Appalachians, to parts of Romania. The list goes on and on. You're basically talking about a witch, a dark witch that is doing some bad, evil stuff. Whether you call it a skinwalker or whatever the situation is, what really strikes me as strange, all of this turns up in culture. You have this kind of stuff. Even the Aztecs believe had shapeshifters. The jaguar men. You find the lion men and the leopard men in Africa. You find the berserkers and the wolf men in Norway and the Vikings. The Ufanar, as they are called. The Ufadar were the premier warriors. They are supposedly men who took certain drugs, they took certain rituals, they did certain things with blood sacrifices where they actually became wolf warriors, wolf walkers, as we call them. They were actually part man, part wolf. That's kind of like a werewolf in my book, definitely. And that is also a skinwalker, is it not? You're walking in the skin of some other animal. And you have this popping up in cultures all over the world. Right here where I live in the state of South Carolina, we have the boo hag. The boo hag can do some shape shifting on you too. It can look like other people. It can also steal your skin and wear that. That's a skinwalker too, in another strange kind of a way. It is definitely still a skinwalker. And also, it has the attributes of a vampire because the boo hag sits on your chest and slowly sucks the life out of you, not just your blood, but your life essence. And with every breath you take, which gets shorter and shorter, it is drawing that out of you until eventually, and it will steal your skin. And the next day, when they see they don't see just the boo hag, they see someone that looks like that person because it's wearing their skin. This is getting freaky, definitely, when you get into this kind of territory, because there again, it is accomplishing what all dark and evil magic does. It is twisting, bending, reshaping, manipulating reality. And whenever you do that to people, do that even against the laws of nature and the universe, you are doing some bad, bad mojo there. You're doing some bad juju, okay? And that's what really gets me. This is a very powerful dark entity. Uh, I would warn people if you do have skinwalker activity. I have actually run into skinwalkers myself, and it's definitely a dark, dark encounter every time that happens. My advice to you is to stay away completely away from these things if possible. But if you do encounter one and you can't have it, it might be a good idea to get out of Dodge as quick as possible because you do not absolutely know exactly what it is you're dealing with because they will fix it that way. They will do that to twist and bend your reality. You don't know what's real and what's not real. So you're up against a very dangerous, unpredictable, like the werewolf. You're up against that kind of an entity with a skinwalker. All bets are off when you meet him or her, as the case may be. Most of the time, it's supposed to be usually a man, but they can be female skinwalkers too. Just these the ones I ran into were female, by the way. So that's the interesting part of all this. It could be anybody you know by daytime or by in the average real world, they can look like somebody else, but come night, they can be anything, anything that they want to be. So all bets are off. But when you play that Skinwalker card on the table, anything can happen. You might as well as expect the unexpected because that's what you're going to get. But I find it very fascinating that some of these Bigfoot that people see, some of these dogmen supposedly that people encounter, what are they really? Are they really what you think they are, or something else going on here? You really don't know. There's really no way to really know unless you do know how to spot the skinwalker. There are things you can do to protect yourself from skinwalkers because you got to remember one other thing. The biggest weakness of the skinwalker is the fact that deep down under whatever it may be, it still has human properties to it. Although the skinwalker is unnaturally long lived, I'm not going to say that it is immortal, but it can live for hundreds of years. Their magic can make them, and their black magic can make them endure through circumstances and all that if they're smart. A lot of them are not as smart as they think they are sometimes, and that is what gets their plans skewed, and that's what gets them caught sometimes. They do know this. They respect good magic or good intentions, good powers. They respect that because it is very much against what they are doing. It is the anti skinwalker stuff that you need to concentrate on. Not only what keeps them away, but disempowers their power. That's what you got to look at in many ways. So there are ways, and you need to learn these things. You need to find out about that. And we may do a show on that in the future, telling about some of the things you can do and how you can protect yourself, your property, your loved ones from skinwalker activity. But if you ever encounter one, just like a bear on the trail, your best bet is to try to either get out of that situation alive. That's what your main aim and your goal needs to be, because also deep under that, whatever that skinwalker may look like or appear to be, and whatever power it takes upon itself, not only is it human, but it has the mind of a human. And that to me is the most dangerous ability that it does possess. I think that's the most dangerous aspect of it all. You're dealing with a malevolent, evil, vicious mind of a human being. And that, my friend, is what makes it an ultimate weapon in many ways, um, against humanity itself. So the Skinwalker is very interesting, and it can do things, of course, the werewolf can't do, and vice versa, and also Dogman as well. When it comes to Dogman, I think there are certain instances where he is part of black magic. He can be conjured up from the darkness and brought forth through these spiritual doorways or dimensions or wherever it is they come from. So there is a possibility that a lot of these things are definitely interdimensional in some ways. I'm not going to say they're like space aliens from outer space being interdimensional, but they are coming out of spiritual dimensions. There are definitely, and I've seen this with my own eyes in certain instances, there are definitely spiritual dimensions to this universe. See them, but that does not mean they are definitely not there. So we can encounter things that come forth from these dimensions. And some of them may look like Dogman. Some of them may even look like Sasquatch or Yeti or whatever the situation is. You've got that possibility that you're dealing with. So you have to be very, very careful. And know this though, before interdimensional doorways are open, however, whatever tag you want to give them, portals, whatever the situation is, certain things are going to happen to let you know that's probably what's going on. You're going to get either a tingling sensation, you're going to get a feeling of being out of space and time. You're going to get a real weird kind of feeling or vibe from this. And you may even feel real vibrations. You may hear certain frequencies. I've heard people report a strange humming like in the air. You may even see mists and strange fogs like they emanate from these things. Whenever these things happen, along with other types, and we won't get into that tonight, but along with other things that happen, especially like magnetic compasses deviating, um, you got to remember that what you're dealing with is something, my friend, from another world. It's not from this world itself. It is from otherworldly sources. So when you do experience these things, you know that some kind of doorway is definitely being opened. And God only knows what's coming through that doorway once it is open, because we don't know without a doubt what's on the other side of that doorway. And if someone has opened this doorway with dark magic or witchcraft or sorcery, whatever the situation, they don't know what's out there really either. Although they may be calling forth a certain individual thing that they want, they really don't know what they're going to get either. So that's the core. What happens with the spiritual doorways and things like that, you're taking a big chance both ways. And there have been, and I have known instances in the past where people using pentagrams and stuff like that, signals, demonic signals, and all this stuff to open these doorways, no control over what they open the door to. And that's a very real risk you run with stuff like that. And I've had people ask me that in the past, how do I do this? How do I do that? Can I become a werewolf? Can I be a skinwalker? And I say, you don't want to go there. You think you do, but you really don't want to go there because you don't know what's going to happen to you. So it's a very highly dangerous game to play. It's really not a game, but some people look at it that way. And it can cost you a whole lot worse than you would think possible. Things can go really bad very quickly. I have seen that happen. And so I know that this is a very real part of what the risk it is you're running with these things. Because you are dealing with a very dark, insidious, powerful demonic force when you tap into this stuff. But something bad's going to happen. I've often said it's like playing with a rattlesnake. Sooner or later it's going to bite you if you're not careful. And that's what this is. Definitely when it comes to dark black magic and stuff like this, is the one risk that you will always run with this. But the Skinwalker, he knows these risks, but he's willing to take them because he's got really in the end nothing to lose. Really, he's already lost everything anyway, even his humanity to a certain extent. That is one of the most dangerous things you will ever run into. So that's the Skinwalker, and I think the power of the Skinwalker has not really ever been truly explained in many terms because it is very supernatural, very hidden. A lot of it is very hidden. I know exactly what it takes to do these things. Although I would never do it. I don't intend to do that, or I would never instruct anyone on that. You're seeking this kind of power. You're never seeking it for any of the good reasons. It's always for bad intentions and bad reasons. So it's never a good idea to go into that territory, no matter what, because you can. The bad thing about the Skinwalker and any of these other type things is not just the power that you acquire; it is the darkness that eventually encompasses you, and you are lost finally in the darkness. It's very, very, be very, very careful, especially if you think you're encountering something like a skinwalker, because you really, really don't realize what you may be truly facing. Got to understand that a lot in this world is not, written down. A lot is not truly known or evaluated in the right way, and the things that skinwalkers, witches, and all that are doing, these dark witches, when they mess around with this black magic and witchcraft, they don't even know a lot of times exactly what it is that they're fooling around with. So it's a loose cannon type thing, and that makes it even more dangerous in many aspects. But there are definitely different ways to protect yourself from that. But let me say this: the number one thing you must be equipped with when you go up against monsters of this kind, and I do call them monsters not very lightly either. They truly are monsters in my book. Some of the most monstrous monsters of all are human beings. Okay, absolutely. And when you come up against this, the number one thing that you can arm yourself with, I've had people ask me that over the years, is the pure heart. I mean, you got to come from a good place with this. Your intentions have got to be good. If your intentions are evil or dark, then they're going to match your intentions. Okay, they feel that, they know that. They're like an animal in many aspects. They have animal qualities. You've got to remember that about the skinwalker. They're not just a human with a skin on them. They are also that animal, whatever they possess or become or change or shapeshift into. They are also that animal, and animals can smell fear on you. And when you go over into the animal kingdom with this kind of stuff, you got to remember that's what animals can do. If you ever rode a horse that smells your fear, he'll take advantage of that. You're not the boss; he's the boss, and that's when you're going to have a very bad ride on that horse. Other animals are that way too. They know that. You meet a bear on the trail, he immediately can smell your fear. Or if you're aggressive with him, he recognizes that too. The best thing, of course, is in that situation is I hope you haven't encountered the bear on a bad day for him. But the interesting thing about all this, you got to remember they're coming from the animal world too on that, and you got to remember that. That's very important. But if your intentions are good, you're coming from a good place. You have that kind of pure heart, I call it, and you've got a good attitude or something. That's going to go a long ways to help you. It's not going to be the only thing you need. Of course, a good weapon is definitely something you're going to have, and I'm talking about a physical weapon. But there are also spiritual weapons that you use against this thing. And having that pure heart, having those good intentions, thinking of the light that surrounds you, of faith in God, whatever your situation is, this can go very far in your protection against these things, because not only are you dealing with just animal activity, but you're dealing with human and spiritual stuff as well. Those are the three biggies that you're dealing with the skinwalker and things like that. Also, Dogman is the same way. Also, Sasquatch would definitely be the same way. A lot of these cryptids are going to pick up on what you feel, whether it's fear or if you're not going to be bullied by them. They're like running into bullies at school in some ways. If you stand up to them, they respect that. Eventually, they got to respect it. So it's good if you go into a situation against darkness, my friends, like this, that you need to have that power on your side. You need to make them respect you for what you can do, not just for that, but just your spiritual output as well. It goes very far with that. So that is the one main thing you can really arm yourself with against these type of spiritual entities or these skinwalkers and stuff like that. Your heart is a formidable weapon, just like your brain is as well, and your spirit too. All of this tie in together to make you and give you the warrior mentality, I call it. If you have that right attitude, they're going to respect that most of the time. They're going to leave you alone. And even cryptids, even skinwalkers and all that, they respect that as well. Absolutely. So that's the one thing you need to keep in mind if you ever encounter any of these things, or come up against these things. It definitely comes down to what you are and that warrior mentality you got to have. You got to have that mindset um, that will make them respect you for what you can do, not just for what they can do, but what you can do against them. And I think that is very highly important when dealing with subjects like this. This is a an incident supposedly that took place in the heartland of America. I can't say exactly where it was. I'm not at liberty to do that, but it was definitely uh, in the southwestern corner of the nation, back down that way. And it's a very interesting story. And there was a legend or a story that went around in this area about a very malevolent and very evil uh, Indian witch doctor, or medicine man, as they call them, who was a also the word is Diablero, which is another name for it, but very much similar to what you call the Yinalushi or the Skinwalker. Um, he was supposed to be a very evil man who was touched by the Great Spirit in early life to become something like a shaman, a medicine man. But he went in the wrong direction with it. He supposedly, his story is that he lost a love of his life to another North American Indian man who was involved with this too. But she actually left him for her. She left her for him for another man. So his whole life kind of went bad on him, and he turned then to the dark side, began to study the darker arts of going into skinwalker and stuff like that. Other than shaman, the good parts of the shaman, he became evil to a great extent. And one of the things that precipitated this is that one time while he was doing his evil chants, rituals, whatever the situation, he was actually, and this is back when he was young, he was actually struck by lightning during a storm, and the lightning bolt actually hit him on top of his head and ran down his whole body. Supposedly, it left a scar down his whole body. It took one of his eyes out. It was just, it was no longer, it was an eye there, but it was no longer usable. And the eye itself was white, milky white. And that's where he got the nickname. But that scar was on his face too. People avoided him whenever possible because he just smelled like evil. You know, he was terrible guy, and bad things always happened around him and things. And so eventually he got worse and worse. He really had a very virulent hatred toward them as well, and also, but he was an instigator of trouble. He was always causing some kind of trouble, or you could see if something bad happened, or maybe even crime. He was involved in crime in that area as well. So he was just bad, 100% bad to the bone. Someone that people definitely avoided at all costs most of the time. So he lived alone in an old hut out in the out towards the desert, the Badlands, and people left him alone. And most of the time, he left people alone. But if you ever wandered onto his property, that he, his area or his territory, like a mountain lion or a bear or anything like that, he would begin to hunt you. He would stalk you. People feared him. He was supposed to be one of the most premier skinwalker, witches, shaman, whatever name you want to give him around. But he was one of the most evil, definitely. And they say his favorite form was to take was that of a coyote. He did once in a while. He would take on the form of a raven, maybe even a deer sometimes, and a wolf too, for that matter. But his favorite form was the coyote, because the coyote to him was sort of like his spirit animal. And the coyote was looked upon by the people of the res as being, the embodiment of the trickster type spirit, And so that was his favorite thing about it. And he felt very much kin to the coyote. He even wore a lot of the coyote furs on him, and especially his head. On his head, he wore the head of a coyote, the hollowed out head like of a coyote, partly skull, partly fur on it. That was one of the things he wore, especially when he was doing his dark rituals and things that he would do. So the story went on about people feared him. People still will avoid that area because the area had a lot of stories of weird animals being seen and strange noises and screams in the night, things that went on for years. And there was the story about some people who went camping very near to where this happened, and they actually saw his old hut. They went up and saw the old hut looking around. And that night, when they went back to camp, is when strange things began supposedly to happen. Um, just weird things to begin with. Certain things would go missing. They couldn't find keys or stuff like that. And then weird noises during the night, sounds around the tents. They had two tents pitched out there in the Badlands, and it was pretty warm night, so the tents were kind of left open. If you've ever gone camping, you know what I'm talking about. When it gets pretty warm at night, you usually leave the flaps open and leave the mosquito flaps up on your tent. So that's what they did. And all night long, they could hear weird noises, and it wasn't just the noises of the desert or the Badlands. It was other noises that went beyond that. It was like somebody mumbling in the distance. They heard one time they thought what sounded like someone beating a drum. And another time they began to hear coyotes, but these coyotes didn't sound right. They didn't sound like the regular coyotes. There was one coyote in particular that sounded very strange to them. It was almost, instead of howling, like screaming sometimes. This really put them all on the edge, so none of them got any very much sleep that night. And they even in the morning found some scratch marks on one of the tent, and no one had heard anything during the night. But all night long while they were there, they felt that they were definitely being watched by something there, and they felt a different kind of a spirit there. And it was a dark and foreboding type of spirit that they felt. So the whole night was felt in almost a very strange kind of terror for them. They were very happy to see the sun come up in the morning. Some of them laughed about it. But as they were packing up to leave, the father immediately began to hurry them up. To hurry up, we got to go, we got to go, we got to go. And the mothers were saying, why are you in such a hurry? We got all day to leave. He says, no, we got to get out of here. We got to get out of here now. We got to go. So they finally got everybody in the car, and the father looked very nervous. He was kind of upset, and they couldn't understand what was going on with him. So they got maybe about 40 miles some odd down the road out of the Badlands and back towards the city when the father began to relax a little bit. But he kept looking. The one strange thing about it on the way back, he kept looking in the rearview mirror most of the way back till they got to almost back to the city. So the wife asked him, said, "What's wrong with you, honey?" He said, you got real upset or nothing like that?" And he said, "No, it wasn't nothing." He said, "I saw something back there at that camp." Said, "I saw something." And that thing followed us for 20 or 15, 20 miles into the trip. He said it was the biggest coyote I've ever seen, and one of his eyes were white. The second story I was going to talk to you about today, the second incident, is that I got a report, not long ago, and I might have mentioned this last time I was with you, that I can't reveal who it was and exactly where it was, but this man supposedly saw an interesting thing take place in the woods near where he lives, and he actually said that he may have seen some type of a ceremony or a ritual that was taking place that was supposedly being done by a group of things. He says things because they didn't look like people to him. He said that either they were very tall and big people that were wearing some kind of fur, or they were something like, I'm not going to say skinwalkers, but or something rather like Dogman, and I've never heard of Dogman doing anything like this. This sounds more like a werewolf cult to me, which is basically what he described in a way of what they were doing out there. But he said that he didn't get a good look at it, and it was all in shadow. A lot of it was in shadow, but he could see something, and this is something I've always stressed to a lot of people when we talk about cryptids and stuff like that. I had my own incident very similar to that, where I saw something stand up in the shadow one night in the forest when we were out looking for something else, and it was very tall and very thin. I'm gonna say thin in the way it was not like a bear. I've had a lot of people over the years say, "Oh, that was a bear you saw." No, this was not a bear because I have had a lot of encounters with bears. And the one thing it always tells me something about what you're seeing, even though you can't see it definitively, okay? And I can't say for sure to this day that what I was looking at was a dog man or a werewolf or anything like that. I can't say that 100%. So I never have claimed to see that. But what I was looking at had one distinctive feature. We got to always remember bears have rounded ears. This thing had pointed ears. And the only thing I know of like that out there, except for mountain lions and stuff like that, would definitely be a wolf has pointed ears. And that's the one thing I look for, especially if you're looking at a silhouette and you can't see exactly what it is that you're looking at, or it's very dim, or whatever the situation. But that is exactly what kind of went on with this ritual thing. He said I could see them, but I couldn't really 100% see them. They weren't in light. But he said that's what their forms looked like. Either they were wearing and he said it was pretty warm weather. There was no reason for them to be wearing fur of any kind, unless that was some kind of a thing that they had on, or what, or was it, fur on their bodies. Uh, but that was very strange. And what struck me as interesting, I told him to go back to the place, after daylight and all that, and to be very, very careful because these areas like that are used by these kind of cults and things like that. Can be watched. They're venerated and watched in guarded areas, and I'm going to talk about that in the next story about something like that. But anyway, he went back to look around in this area, and he did find some logs and stuff that were laid out in a very ritualistic looking form, but they had been sort of hastily, pushed aside or whatever. But he could tell they had been laid out in a pattern, and it was very much like the pattern of a pentagram. And in the very center of it, there had been a fire. There had been some kind of a fire. Now there was no fire then when he saw it. Maybe they were putting it out, or maybe the ritual was ending. I think the way he described it, he sounded like to me he came at the very end of this ritual, whatever it was. But the reason he calls it ritual is because these things were talking, they were mumbling. He said they were saying something in another kind of language or something. And he said it was a weird language. It was more like grunts and growls, and he said it was just something that sounded very inhuman to him. It didn't sound like the kind of a language or words or something that humans would use in that respect. It was a very strange case, and he said he did find what looked like very large dog prints or wolf prints around in that area. I told him what he needed to do to put a ward over this area. In other words, to spiritually cleanse it, and he was going to do that. And that includes casting sea salt and doing what you need to do in that area. That would probably mess it up for them. Maybe he didn't want them to come back. In other words, it's kind of close to his house, and that's what he was scared of mostly. I don't want this to happen again. I don't want them out here around close to where I live. And is there anything I can do? So I gave him some information and things he needed to do that would probably, hopefully, mess up their ritual area for them, and they'll go on somewhere else. But it was a very, very interesting case, and I have warned people about that over the years. If you do come upon something like that, be very careful in how you deal with it. because they are meeting in secrecy, and they do not want that secrecy violated under any circumstances. And they will do whatever it takes, and I do stress the word whatever it takes to keep that secrecy in place and to keep their area from being found out. And the rituals that they do, they don't want people watching them. They don't want anybody involved in it. They do not, above all, want to be interfered, because the rituals are very important, and the respect is they must be carried out a certain way. And any kind of interference destroys the ritual, and they're not going to allow that under any circumstances. So you are in very grave danger if you ever walk up on something like that, or if you find yourself in an area that looks like it may have been used for something like that. Keep in mind that they put guardian spirits, spiritual wards over these things, and they put them there to guard these areas. And these can be very bad demonic forces that you're walking into. And here's the other bad part of it: if you walk into these areas of evil that are being used for these kind of practices, you can also acquire an attachment. These spirits can attach to you and follow you back home. You can get into some big trouble by doing this. So be very, very, very careful what areas you even walk into, and be very careful things that you walk upon or see. Don't touch the things that are there. Don't stay there. Just get out immediately. That's the best thing to do, is to vacate the premises as quick as possible. But be aware that these things do happen, especially out in remote areas. That's where they go, away from prying eyes, away from humanity, and all that, to do these rituals and all that. And there are definitely, my friends, cults of witches. There are cults of vampires, and there are cults of werewolves who do these things. And they have their own covens, which they engage in these practices, and they can be very dangerous to the outsiders to these things. I know I've seen these with my own eyes, things that they've done like that, and they really guard these areas greatly. So be very careful if you ever run up on that. And if you do run up on that situation, please seek advice from me or somebody that knows about these things, about what you need to do and things you can do to protect yourselves from this ever-present darkness of these kind of areas and things that go on. We need to be very careful how we deal with these things. Now, the last story I want to tell you does relate to this a lot, and this happened to me a good many years back. I got a phone call from California one day, and it was another lady. Now, I still, due to client representation, I can't reveal who she was or anything like that, but I have a feeling she must have been a well known actress. Okay, I can't say, I don't know for sure, but I think it was something along those lines. But anyway, she had acquired a ranch out in Southern California, and she had a lot of beautiful horses that she kept on the ranch, and she had a daughter. She was divorced, but she had a daughter, and the daughter lived with her, and they lived on this ranch. And They had horses. They had, I think, a few goats, and they had a dog, a couple of dogs, I think, and just the regular live animal stock that they had in places like that. But mostly, they were raising horses because the young daughter loved to ride horses, and she was very interested in horses and wanted to become a professional rider. Anyway, they owned this ranch, and this woman evidently was pretty well known. I think that's why she didn't want her identity revealed. So she never actually told me her name. But anyway, to make a long story short, they were happy on the ranch. They had lived there for about 2 years. But all of a sudden, there had been a bad storm in the area. And there had been a bad windstorm, a lot of dust had blown up, and there had been some rain and some a little localized flooding and stuff that had gone on, but not real bad, but enough, that affects what I'm going to tell you about in this story. So anyway, She told me that they had lived there pretty happily for 2 years, and raising the horses and messing with their livestock and all that. When all of a sudden trouble began, and she told me this just began in small ways. Weird things going on in the house, hearing weird noises outside once in a while, finding strange footprints outside, hearing things in the house, doors opening, lights being found on when they were supposed to be turned off. There was even there was like one incident where they had a gas container outside that they would use on a light. You know, it was a propane gas container, small one. It was a tabletop thing, and it sat on the table out there. And they know without a doubt that they turned this thing off. And the next time when they went to use it, it had no gas left in it, and it was in the on position. And she said there was nobody but her and her daughter around. They had a ranch hand who came on once in a while, once a couple of times a week, who would come out, to bale hay and do whatever things, stuff that need to be done around the ranch. But he didn't live there. He just came out and helped them once in a while and do some of the chores that need to be done. But they lived there most of the time in a very reclusive area. And there were like canyons around too. Also, I want to make that point too as well. So anyway, weird things began to go on and began to increase in intensity as time went on, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. And so I asked the usual questions. Have you brought anything different into the house? Have you done anything different? When everything after all the questioning and all after the interview, I could not find out a real cause for what was going on here. Usually, when anything like that happens, as an investigative researcher, you look for the cause and the origin of things. That's what helps you understand things more. So, the main thing I was doing was trying to find out what was causing this to happen, of course, and how to help them in their problem. Nothing panned out on what I thought might have been going on or what might have been the cause for a lot of this stuff. But the clincher was what happened. Like the woman called me frantically about 2 weeks after the previous interview. She was very frantic about it. She said things are getting really worse. Dr. Carroll, I got to, we got to do something or I'm going to have to move. We're going to have to move. So it's now beginning to, get violent out here. And I said, violent? What do you mean by violent? She said, well, some of the horses have been clawed, scratched, almost like an attack. Said my daughter heard something the other night and looked out the window she pulled the curtain and looked and said there was some kind of a thing standing in the window looking back at her and said it was standing, it was very tall, and she said it looked like a devil dog or something. Well, I usually thought, that sounded like either a werewolf or dogman or something like that, more like what you would describe if you didn't know what you were talking about. I said, really? I said, that's very interesting. She said, yeah, it scared her so bad she's still having nightmares from it, and she never used to ever have nightmares. And said, I woke up the other day and I had like a claw mark on my shoulder. They shouldn't have been there. It was a very red mark that slowly, as the day went on, it went away. And that, of course, sounded to me very demonic in many ways. So she said that things are getting worse. Things are intensifying. And said also we had a goat that was attacked. She said, we have been watching at night, thinking maybe it was coyotes or, it could have been, a cat or something, whatever the situation was. Nothing's out here bothering anything that we can see. I've got outside lights. She said a couple of times they have come on, these automatic lights, but, there's nothing there. And said we're hearing weird, strange noises at night, the whole works. They were really, really getting them freaked out. So I said, let's do a little bit more of a deeper interview. Let me ask you some more questions, try to get to understand. She was even willing to fly me out there if necessary, to look at this situation. But then she told me something that kind of broke the case open for me. Every case every incident like this has a key to it, that helps you open, what's going on. Sometimes there can be more than one key. All right. And that's the way investigative research goes. And she gave me a key that definitely, she said, there's something I forgot to tell you, last time we talked about that storms we had a month or so back, you know, they kind of washed a little bit of a canyon away. And she said, my daughter and I went out there the other day looking around because it's on our property as well, that we own that part of it. And we found that there was an old Indian burial ground out there. And some of it had washed a little bit of it down into the canyon. And all of a sudden, that's a light bulb moment for me. I said, oh, well, that right there explains everything, ma'am. I said, that's probably what's happened. Because without a doubt, the Native Americans, they put these wards, these spiritual guardians, over their sacred places. They don't even want anyone walking through them, especially people that are not of their tribe, messing around any of their kind of graveyards and stuff like that. I said, this right here breaks the case open for you, ma'am. I said, that's probably what's happened. Those graves have been disturbed and it has activated something on your land, something that's not good, and something that sees you as an enemy or as an outsider. I said, what you need to do now is to call or get someone to try to repair the area as much as possible. Then call in some Native American shaman and some medicine man or whatever, and get them to re-bless and consecrate that area. And see if that doesn't take care of your problem. And she said she was writing all this stuff down. She said, I will start on this tomorrow. I will do it tomorrow, and I will call you back when it's done. Well, about a week later, I got a call back from her. The last time I ever heard from her, she said, I did exactly what you said, Dr. Carroll. We repaired what we could, replaced what else we could on the burial ground, shored it up so it won't happen again. I had some people from the reservation out here. They came, they did the ceremonial stuff, they did all that, and everything, just like flipping a switch, everything has stopped. And she said, I want to thank you so very much for helping me. I said, well, that's what I want to hear. When you solve the problem, that's the best part of all. Yeah, I think, there are forces that we're dealing with sometimes. And I've had several cases that dealt with incidents that happened with Native Americans that I had to take it from a Native American perspective on it, and that's what you have to do sometimes when you're especially coming through from another culture. I think without a doubt there are forces out there that we are dealing with sometimes. They go beyond the range of the natural world, without a doubt. I know that. I had somebody ask me that the other day. You've been, well over half a century now investigating all types of things, supernatural, paranormal, and there is a definite unseen world all around us constantly. It is here with us. It exists with us. I think it is in us and part of us in many different ways. But I have known this over the years that, I've encountered many different supernatural entities and incidents that have led me to believe without a doubt there are other forces at work here. Some that we know not of, some that we do know a little bit about, but we don't know enough. And that's what investigation is all about. Yeah, I might have mentioned that in passing, I think. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But anyway, that was a very interesting incident that had happened to me many years ago. And I had gone with a group of people. Actually, it was a church group, and they had gone up into the mountains camping. They had a big camporee going on up there. And I was another friend of mine, and his name, I think his name was Bill, something like that. Bill, but he was not a real good friend. I knew him from school, but he went along too. And we had some pretty fun camping that night, and everybody turned in. And so, I said to Bill, I said, I'm not sleepy. Let's go walk around a little bit, kick around, see what we find out. So I'm always the one that's always been like an explorer. I have to go look around, check things out, and the mountains are definitely one of my favorite places to go. In situations like that, there seems to be a mystery and a magic to all the mountains. It kind of pull me towards them for some reason. I've climbed a lot of mountains over the years and stuff, so always enjoy going to the mountains. It's like going home to me in a way. Anyway, he and I were kind of just walking around. There's an old dirt road, and we're going up the dirt road, and I might have been smoking a cigarette or something. We were walking along, talking, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I hear this whippoorwill. Now, I violated one of the first rules of the Appalachians. Okay, you never whistle at night, and you never ever answer a whistle at night. But this was back when I was young and stupid. Okay. Anyway, this whippoorwill was very close, like in a bush across this dirt road here. And it has a beautiful sound. Now, if you've ever heard one late at night, deep in the forest, it has a very beautiful yet very eerie sound to it. And there is an old superstition about whippoorwills. They will come and collect your soul and take you to the next world. So, but a lot of Native Americans believe that. And that's a very old belief. I think it's in European belief, too, as a matter of fact. Anyway, I hear this whippoorwill very close, so I do the whippoorwill call back on it. And it answers. I told the guy I'm standing with, I'm gonna do the whippoorwill and see if it'll answer me back. Cause I had that happen years ago, one time in the woods, and sure enough, it answered back. So I said, "Come on, let's walk over here to this bush." You know. So I walk over to the. We're going over to the bush, and we walk into the bush. Now, let me explain this. The bush is sort of like there's like some bushes on the side of the road. We go through these hedges, like, and we're in somebody's yard. Because I see a house kind of up on the hill, a little ramshackle looking house on a hill, and under these trees, a stand of trees. You through the bushes, you're in a stand of trees. There was an old picnic table, and I started to at the picnic table. Well, all of a sudden, somebody came up behind me and put a knife at my throat, a very long knife. I started talking very quickly. Hey, maybe I can talk myself out of this situation. And the guy I was with, somebody had done him the same way. Somebody who was a little bit shorter than the one me, and it's a woman doing it. So I'm telling, and when I said that, well, I can think of a lot of different reasons why you shouldn't do that. She kind of laughed a little bit, and she kind of took the knife down. And I turned around and was talking. I was standing right in front of this Cherokee lady, and she probably was in her 20s, I guess. Um, Probably I was around. I'm 6'4". Back then, I was probably not quite that tall. I was over 6 foot. She come up pretty close to 6 foot. Okay, and she was standing there to me with a knife. And her sister turned the other guy loose that I was with. And he was scared. His eyes were like, as big as I mean, big as plates. And I started talking to the girl, trying to talk ourselves, out of this situation. And I could smell I smelled a very strange smell coming from this. It was very much like beer. It smelled a little bit like beer, but also it might have been liquor of some sort as well. But there were other smells intermingled with it. It was very strange. Um, and here's where I'm gonna get descriptive on you. It was like a dark smell. In other words, it was something that was not natural about it. You know what I mean? It wasn't like a body odor or anything like that. It was something else entirely different. And she is talking and she kind of laughs. She says, "Well, what are you doing out this time of the night or something? What are you doing out here, white boy? And I said, "Well, me and my friend, we didn't mean any harm. We were just walking around." I said, "Was that you that whistled?" She said, "Yeah, that was me that whistled, you idiot." She said, "Don't you know you should never answer a whistle at night in these mountains?" And I said, "No, I didn't think about that, and all that stuff." So her sister, and she tells me, she said, "This is my sister." She never told me her names. And she said, "We're out to have some fun too. But we're not out to kind of, what are you out looking for women or something, And I said, "No, we were just out walking around, messing around." She said, "Well, we're going to have some fun tonight too, but we don't have the same kind of fun that you have. We need to get out of here as quick as possible and get away from these people." So I'm talking to try to, get out talk my way out of this. And I say, well, trying to be friendly and everything. And I say, well, I'm sorry we interrupted you. You can go ahead and have your son. We'll leave and all that. She said, oh, we're going to leave. All right. She said, you watch us. She said, you stay right here, white boy, until we get gone. And said, you watch those bushes over there. You keep watching them bushes and you're going to see something you've never seen before. So what's going on here? What's really happening? And she kind of laughs about it. And then and here's the weird part. They walk away and go to those bushes, both of them. Like I said, one's taller than the other by like a foot. Okay. And they kind of hunch down a little bit and then they walk into those bushes. And I'm standing there and looking at that other guy. He's looking at me, and we're standing there looking, and the bushes are moving. And we hear something. Or what are they doing? What are they up to? And the bush is moving and all that. And all of a sudden, the bush stops moving, and stepping out of the bush are two animals. They look, honest to God, like wolves. They are large dogs. And I don't see them right off. I see the back end of them as they walk. They go start slowly up the dirt road in front of us. Now the dirt road, like we're on a mountain, is going up. It's going up. And they start. One is bigger than the other. And they get towards the end of the dirt road. They both turn and look at us. And honest to God, as I'm sitting here, their eyes are glowing red. It's not eye shine like you see it. I've seen animals do a lot of eye shine over the years. Their eyes are glowing red. I mean, almost like flashlight glowing. Okay. And I'm looking at the other guy, and he's looking at me. He said, "Let's get the you know what out of here now." And those things are going around the bend on the road. We take off and get back to camp. And of course, none of us slept that night. And let me say this: there was a fallout from this. For the rest of that camping trip, for me and that same guy, everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong. And I finally ended up telling the guy last time I saw him, before we went back to civilization, back now the camping trip was over. I told him, let's get out of these mountains and maybe think we'll be all right. And he was scared that he would into that. And I saw him a couple of times after that, but I saw him a couple of times later after that, years later. He would never talk about that, never talk about what we saw that night. But that was my incident with the two Cherokee Skinwalker sisters. So there are a lot of. I want to say this to everybody listening tonight. It's not just Dogman and Bigfoot. There are a lot of dark things out there, and the Skinwalkers fall into that. The Wendigo goes with that as well. I've been on the track of a Wendigo. I was on the track one night in the North Carolina mountains with two Cherokee friends of mine, and we were hunting the very famous Wampus cat. Now, the Wampus cat is sort of like a monster mountain lion with 6 legs, supposedly. And we were hunting for that, and all day something had been playing with us. Every once in a while, these cryptids seem like they're playing a cat and mouse game with us. I've had this happen a good many times out in the woods, where they sort of enjoy pulling you in and pushing you out kind of a thing. There's sort of a cat and mouse game going on with them. I think they're having a fun time with us sometimes. And that was what was happening that night, that time. Night fell on us. And finally, we got a line of what we call a track line. That means that's where you can see a lot of different, tracks in one line, like. And we finally got a track line on this, and the two Cherokee were cousins or something like that. And one looks at the other one and says something, and I didn't hear what he said. I said, "What did he say?" And he said, "This is not a Wampus cat that we're looking at here." And I'm looking at the prints too. I said, "This looks more like a big dog or a wolf print." And he said, "That's what it is." I said, "What?" He said, "This is a werewolf, and this is the end of the hunt. We're leaving." So they quit, and I had to go back with them. They were my trackers. I had to go back with them. That was it. They didn't want to hunt that night anymore. And he said, we'll hunt bear, we'll hunt mountain lion, we'll hunt anything, but we will not hunt werewolves.
I do appreciate you coming in and hanging out with us tonight. Before we do let you go, would you like to tell the audience where they can find you?
Okay, well, my podcast is on, I have what's called the Hunting the Shadows podcast channel on YouTube. You can find all of my content on there. I have 3 shows a week. I have on Monday nights at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I have The Road Less Traveled and my good friend Gerald Fountain. We talk about a lot of the offbeat stuff on that. We cover all things. We're sort of like a modern day In Search Of. And on Wednesday night, I have Hunting the Shadows at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I have different guests and stuff on there. Matter of fact, I'm going to have to get you as a guest on there one night. Definitely. And also on Friday night, I have Paranormal Point of View at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Where we talk about paranormal stuff, movies, reviews. I tell some of my case stories and things that have happened to me on different cases. I call it story night, Friday night kind of thing. And you can find my books and all that on Barnes and Noble and Amazon. I've got several books I've written. They're available on there, and also you can find out about them on my website at DennisWCarroll.com. I also have a paranormal consultation service. If you have any kind of a problem, demonological or cryptid or whatever the situation is, you need somebody to talk to about it, or together we can find the answers, hopefully. You can consult with me. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. Just get in contact with me also through DennisWCarroll.com.
Well, you heard that, my friends. We do, for the moment, need to allow Dr. Carroll to get back to his busy schedule and things he does need to attend to. Yet, no worries, though. We will have him on again very soon, and you have 2 solutions to the problem if you are interested in hearing more. Well, go over and check out his good old links in the description down below, or look at our previous playlist in the good old section down below as well. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, and yes, share the truth to the algorithm. Dennis, thanks for hanging out tonight, man.
Anytime, my friend.
Ooh, my creatures of the night, I do adore every single one of you, and thank you for hanging out tonight. Please like, comment, subscribe, share the truth to the algorithm, and remember, there are things that hide in the darkness of the night.